Okay, hold on. Perfect. And we're live. So, welcome to the Scaled Down Livestream, where we dive into all aspects about downsizing, aging, and everything in between. I'm your host, Natalie Lewin of Lux Transitions. I specialize in helping older adults, 65 plus, to scale down to their next chapter. And each week, we bring you expert insights, personal stories, and practical advice to help you navigate these important life transitions. So, today we have the pleasure of exploring all aspects of life and planning ahead. Today we will speak with a special guest joining us from Humphrey's Funeral Home in Toronto. We're sitting down with Daryl Harlick, a pre-planning specialist with years of experience helping individuals and families navigate the often challenging yet very important process of pre-planning funeral arrangements. Daryl has a deep understanding of the benefits of pre-planning, and he's seen firsthand the peace of mind it brings to families in their time of need. He's here today to demystify the process, discuss the misconceptions that often surround pre-planning, and share his expertise on how we can all take the right steps to ensure our loved ones are taken care of when the time comes. So thank you so much, Daryl, for joining us today. We're excited to dive into this conversation.
Thank you, Natalie, for having me. It's a pleasure to be here this afternoon. And hopefully I can answer a lot of questions for people in these hard times and unknown in the funeral business.
Perfect. Well, we look forward to it. So can you start by telling us a little bit about what you do as a pre-planning funeral specialist at Humphrey's?
For sure. It all just starts with that, really just sitting down with a family, with an individual couple, and just walking through really what they would like. Because ultimately, in the end, that's what we hear from the families that are and the estate that's left behind is, what would Aunt Susie or Uncle Bob want? They want it what they want. So we just sit down at their home in our office, and it can be a very casual, and we just walk through, because nowadays the options are endless, really. Years ago, I was sort of raised on the, you have that visitation 2 to 4, 7 to 9, funeral the next day. But things have changed so much now. And that's what people find when they do come in, is the options. And it's so much easier, because then they can, if they want, when you pre-plan, you can take the information away, discuss it with your family, discuss it with your kids, and then come back, as opposed to leaving it to the time, as we say, at need, when somebody passes. All those things have to be answered very quickly. They say within the first 24 hours, there's over 100 questions that have to be answered. And it's a lot when the emotions are really ramped up and high to make those decisions, and you don't want to make things that afterwards you kind of regret that you did or didn't do.
Right. Okay. So walk us through, what does a typical day look like for you?
So it is just meeting. The biggest part is meeting with the families. So we just have appointments where we'll either meet them at their home or come in and sit and go through all those options. There's certainly paperwork that can be filled out. There's one form that we call, it's a preference form. It's all about yourself. And this form, if you do nothing else, and a funeral home has this, because it has information that sometimes your executor may not know, your mother's maiden name, where she was born, all these things. But we need this information to register a death with the province of Ontario. So it's required information. So it's just put in the file. And then we go from there, and we go through the options with each client, discussing whether they want cremation and burial, of course, is the first biggest decision they need to come to grips with.
Okay.
And some know that very quickly, but there are a lot that have to take that away and just aren't sure of it nowadays. And then, of course, then you see what the cost is going to be, and they review how much they want, whether they want a big reception or they just want a simple cremation. And then from there, once we've come to a sort of what they want, we can create a contract for them. And then from there, they can decide, do I want to proceed or just leave? You have two options: leaving that pre-planned, your pre-planned wishes in your file, or you can proceed and prepay it. And then the big thing, though, is always letting your executor know where you have done this.
Right.
If it's a child, that could be one thing. They might know this, but sometimes people use an executor, a lawyer, or somebody, and they don't know where these wishes have been created.
Okay. So I imagine pre-planning a funeral can be very, very emotional.
Yeah.
What would you say to someone who is hesitant or unsure about starting the pre-planning process?
Of course, I'm going to say it's a great thing, but I can only give you comments from people that we have done. I had one it was beginning of last week. It was a couple. He was just not really comfortable with this, but his wife kept saying, we need to do it. Let's do it. Let's do it. So I met with them, and you know what? We have laughs. It's not like we're sitting there in a real serious, what do you want when you die, blah, blah, blah. And it was just very casual, and we went through it. And he said to me, he says, Daryl, thank you. I know it's something I should have done. It's been sitting on my shoulders, sort of. That weight has been lifted. And he says, the big thing is I now realize how many decisions there were to be made.
Right.
And knowing that my son, who is going to be in charge of all this, doesn't have to worry about it. It's sort of, in some ways, it's a gift you've given if it's your family that are looking after your estate, you've given a nice gift to your family.
It sounds like the fear of not knowing probably stalls people from going forward to saying, let's plan, and just fear in general. Because it's like, once you went through that process with him, like, oh, thanks.
Yep.
And then I feel like, somebody said it to me that maybe it's selfish not to do it. And I think as a parent, and what we're going to be leaving, the burden, let's say, that we're going to leave our children, we just want to lighten it. We don't want to leave this heavy burden with them.
Yeah. And yes, there is fear in there. I think some people come to that, they think, oh, now that I've done my funeral plans, am I going to die?
Right.
Of course not. But yeah, it takes so much off of whether it's just the decisions and or the financial side of it. If it's all prepaid, the family don't have to worry about even the paying part of it, because it's all done. And that's a huge thing, because too, if you prepay, you pre-plan it, prepay it, and say today it's worth $10,000. You pass away in 20 years, and now we know what the cost of things are doing today, how they're climbing crazy, and what the state of the economy is. And if it's worth $15,000 when you pass, there is no cost to the family. That money will cover that amount. And if it doesn't, that's something the funeral home takes. So it's guaranteeing today's price. And as I say, we know what the prices are doing, going up through the roof. And, so of course, prices of a funeral and everything will increase. So it is protecting yourself at those prices, which can be a big financial savings also.
Perfect. So I have a question for you. Let's say I decide to pre-plan.
Yeah.
I live in Toronto.
Mm-hmm.
Things planned, but then at some point I move.
Yep.
Whether it's out of the city or out of the country. What happens then?
So if you're outside the city and you're still here, you can transfer it because when you invest your money, it doesn't sit with the funeral home. So your money is protected. So there's another thing that people don't have to worry about, that if a funeral home closed, am I losing my money? No, it's invested with a trust company, a third party. So if you do move and you move to Kingston, and you're going to deal with a funeral home there, everything can be transferred to them. So therefore you don't have to worry about it. If you decide to go somewhere else, they can always say at the time of passing, your executor can let us know, and your funds can go to that funeral home. Or you always have the option of deciding to cancel and just get a refund, and then you're going to some other part of the world, and you can then just take it and start over there.
Okay.
So you do have options that are open for you.
Okay, perfect. So I know you kind of touched on this already, the benefits of pre-planning, but are there any other benefits that you may not have touched on that you could go into some more detail about?
Well, the biggest is, as I mentioned, is the cost increase, especially in this day and age, on protecting it so that it's not going to cost you any more. The other part is you're not paying, if you are getting interest on that money sitting somewhere and you're paying income tax on that interest, you're not going to be doing that because that will be sitting there just growing and you're not getting a T5 for that interest. So your savings there also. And as far as else prepaying, those are the biggest that people really hone in on and feel that why they like to do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of misconceptions about pre-planning funerals. What are some of the most common ones you've had to deal with in your experience?
About pre-planning?
Yes.
I think it's just a lot of the thing is, so kind of touched on about, is just not understanding. Okay. Understanding how it works, that the options that are available, because that's what people come in and they're like, what should I do? And so we try to guide them. A lot of it's, we'll just listen to them, talk away for however long it is. And then you sort of can pick out of that where they are sort of feeling and going. And of course, then they look to us for some guidance as to what they have said, what would fit their wishes. But it's misconceived. Not sure on that really, where we would,
Okay, that's fair. I have a question. So we're talking about pre-planning. What do the numbers look like in terms of pre-planning? Do most people that you come across that have passed, do most people have a plan in place, or are most people dealing with it as the death occurs?
9% of Canadians pre-plan.
9%.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It's like almost 90% of the Canadians feel that it's important to have the discussion, but only like 9% actually do anything about it to take that burden and stress off of their family. People just think that, but they're never going to die, whatever it may be. It's just that hard step to take to go in and pre-plan. And the thing is, even before that, only like 50% of Canadians have a will.
Wow.
So, if I was going to recommend anything to somebody, get your will done first and foremost, because that certainly directs who's going to look after your wishes. And if there isn't, and it goes into the city and everything, it's not where you want to end up having your wishes looked after, and they will, if there is no will, no family in that, you don't, maybe you want to be buried somewhere, and well, that's not the case when there's no will in that. So it's really important to make sure you write that will, and not only just write a will where your estate is going, but who is going to be your executor. Your executor is very important. We have our power of attorney. Our power of attorney takes care of us up to that last breath. Once we take that last breath, the power of attorney it ends and it turns over to the executor. Right. So in that will, because then people will say, oh yeah, I wrote my will, 30 years ago. And who's your executor? And they'll go, oh, he's passed away, or, we're not friends with him anymore. We're not even talking to him. Right. So you want to make sure that will is updated, has a current executor who you trust and knows your wishes, because an executor, when you pass, is in charge.
Okay.
So even if you pre-plan, if you come in, Natalie, and say, I'm pre-planning this and everything, and then your executor, you pass and your executor comes in, that executor can do what they want. Okay. So even though you've pre-planned certain way, certain funeral, the executor can say, no, we're going to do this instead. So okay. It's important to have an executor that first knows your wishes and believes in them and will carry those wishes out at the time. So that part I can't stress enough, having that will with an up-to-date executor. Mm-hmm. And then, like I said, 9% of people pre-plan in Canada, and then just taking that step and taking away that stress. I had a lady it wasn't a lady, it was a family, and she had passed, their mom passed, she was 99, and they didn't realize she had been into the funeral home. They just knew she had, maybe had talked to us. And then they came in when she passed, and they just sat down thinking, okay, here we go. We got to answer all these questions, make all these plans, get everything that mom wants. And we passed them a file. And they says, what's that? And we're going, that's everything. Your mom has planned down to the fine, like she's all her biblical lessons and hymns that she wants done. She has planned everything. They had to do nothing except go to the florist and pick out flowers. Right. And they said, you know what? That is the nicest gift we've ever received. And now we can't thank our mother for such a gift. And that's just from clients. And we hear that often. So it takes a lot of stress away when you do that. And then the next step would be if you want to prepay for your funeral, right, and save the increase in cost, right, over the years.
Because we know it's going to increase and continue to increase.
Exactly.
I have a question. I want to take you back a little bit. Yeah. So you were speaking about the executor and how important it is to choose an executor that you trust and honestly like. What if you die before that happens and you wanted to change your executor, but you didn't? Are there any legal remedies for a family to contest whoever the executor is?
So I'm not a trained lawyer. Okay. So, but it would just be, that the courts come down to who can produce the latest will. And we would ask, we have that in our files. When somebody comes and pre-plans, we will ask for a copy of the will, not the contents of the will, but the first page, who lays out who the executor is, and the last page, who it's signed by and the date. So we do have that in, and by law, then that is who we go by. So if they want to go and contest it, that is something that would certainly go into the courts, and that would be a time-consuming thing. But that would be a lawyer that would have to direct them on that one.
But have you heard of situations like that? So before it got to the lawyer, that you hear that there's an issue between families. Between executors.
Yeah, we, and again, that goes back to the pre-planning, that because we'll have families say, oh no, mom wanted this. One, child say, oh, mom want this. And the other one saying, oh, I want this. And because emotions are so high then, when mom has just passed, that some of the arguments, heated discussions get very hot, but it comes down to if only the one child is an executor, that is who we ultimately end up taking direction from.
Okay.
So even if there's other children, but mom didn't put them down as an executor, it is that one child or whoever is listed as the executor. And it's up to them. If there's co-executors, it is up to them to decide before we can proceed. We will just have to sit and wait until they come to an agreement on what their wishes are.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. So, many people, myself included, when I think about pre-planning, I think about the plot, the casket.
Yeah.
Can you walk us through some of the more detailed aspects of pre-planning that most people might not even think about?
Well, of course, the biggest one we always ask basically first is, do you want cremation or burial?
Okay.
And then from there, it goes down. So if it is either one, we can take place. And then what do you want? Do you want a religious service? Yes or no? Do you want a gathering? Do you want a visitation? Do you want a reception? Do you want something in a church?
Okay.
Is there pictures around? Sometimes, some people will write, a lot of people, they will write their obituary.
Oh, okay.
They write it because all of a sudden it goes to somebody else and it's like, oh, what was his aunt's name and how did you spell it and what did he do for part of his career or something.
Mm-hmm.
So for you to write, I know it sounds a little sad, but writing your own obituary, of course, there's details you don't put in, but I have numerous files that have an obituary written by the person. And even if it's not totally done, all the important details are there, and then it can be massaged at the time. But
Okay.
doing your obituary, having that in your file.
Okay.
Do you want a reception? What cemetery would you like to go to? Or if you're being cremated, maybe your ashes aren't going to a cemetery. Where would you like your cremated remains to go? Some people scatter them places. Some people take them to different parts of the country. Are they to be all kept together? Sometimes there's family members and they all want some, but the person that's in charge says, no, dad is staying, all his ashes are staying together and it's all being taken back to England. That's what he wanted. Is there special music that you that
Okay.
you like, that you want? I have files and that's what we will list. We'll list music. Either could even be people that they want to be special people that say, make sure they don't forget to tell so-and-so. So the more you bring on all those aspects and put in a file, it just, again, makes it easier and takes away a lot of that thought process. Some people are like, what am I going to wear when I go in, if I'm going into a casket? My favorite top. And then what cemetery, like I said, headstones, people pick out the headstones for a cemetery, all these markers, kind of the list keeps going on. It's sort of like we plan everything in our life, whether it's our birthday parties, our weddings, our retirements,
Right.
all these things, but we kind of, I don't know if it's we forget put it off on doing that final one.
Yeah, exactly.
And the thing is, like I said, people always say what would George want? I just want whatever George wanted. What would George want? What do you think George wanted? And so that's what it comes down to. People just making sure that, that person is happy with what is going to take place.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
What do you think is the best time for someone to start thinking about pre-planning? Is there a typical age? I mean, only 9%.
Yeah.
No.
At any age, because at least if you put down, because we don't know when our day is going to come,
Right,
and at what age. So an age doesn't fit in there. The sooner you do it and prepay it, because I've seen files where people have maybe done it 25, 30 years ago.
Wow.
And what they, back then might have been $1,000, and now it's well over 10,000 or something, and they're not paying anything extra. So if you can afford it, and you can always update it, all of a sudden through the years, what you wish for sort of has changed, and you can always update your file that way. So I would just say the sooner the better, because then the money that you invest is less than it would be if you wait it till you're even 80 or 90. But even doing it then, it's still, not only does it maybe save you as much money, but it saves the stress on the family at that point, which is the big one.
Perfect. Okay. So there's a lot of flexibility in pre-planning today. And so with options like cremation, green burials, or custom ceremonies, how have these trends shaped the way you approach pre-planning with your clients?
Well, there is just, since there is a lot more options, and people are aware of these, and so there's just a lot more information is being given, where people come in and they don't know for sure until they hear what is a green burial, where can a green burial, and some of it comes down to maybe what's the cost of this cremation versus another cremation, whether it's an aqua cremation or a regular cremation. So sometimes the cost comes into the effect, but a lot of it is just information gathering. People will come in, and then, like I mentioned before, they come in, get all this information, and go away and discuss it, maybe research some more and find out what they'd really like. And so there's where you don't have to make that, if you're doing it at the time somebody passes, you got to do that sort of that day. You're under a time crunch. Whereas this, it does allow you to go away, and some may not have heard of aqua cremation, so they're like, oh, what is that all about? And so we can explain it to them, and they can go and see if this is something that would be for them, for sure.
So maybe some people don't know what aqua cremation is. Do you want to share a little bit about it?
Sure. So there's the two types of cremation. The one being what we know of, with fire going into a retort, and our bodies going down to ashes. Aquamation is a new environmental one, where the one that we deal with is Peterborough way, and it's dealing with mainly water. So the body goes into a cylinder, and it's just water that is swished around the body inside a cage, and it removes all the fluids and the body part, and just remains then is the bones of a human. And then those bones are dried, and then they are pulverized into the ashes. So you're not using the energy of the retort for the hot fire, and, as we would say, a burning process. So it's different. Not everybody, there's not that many places that do it yet, but people are seeing it and reading and researching it more to see if it suits their way.
Okay.
For sure.
So what's one piece of advice you would give to anyone watching today who's considering pre-planning their funeral but hasn't taken that first step to do so?
Just make the call, just chat, just talk away.
Right.
It's nothing, I'm talking to people all day, and it's just, giving them information, really, and letting them go, but just making a call and doing it, because it's not, I'm not here to just get you to sign the bottom line, get your money, blah, blah, blah. Right. Nothing like that. It is just making you feel that you have the information that you need, and then take the steps and get that information onto a file. If you prepay it or not, that would be your preference, but that would be one. And the one thing to often for people who nowadays, as they get up, which a lot don't think about, But part of your pre-planning is also your digital legacy. As we're sitting here in a live chat, we all have numerous Facebooks, Instagram, TikTok accounts, all these different accounts, accounts on Amazon, all these places, email accounts. Take a note of those and have them somewhere with your passwords safely stored away. It's becoming a big thing, and because we all have so much of this digital part that then we pass, but our digital stays going.
Right.
And what they can do with it is beyond me on the digital part. But, I have a friend in particular that her husband died suddenly, and now we're getting emails from people saying their pictures, and it's all scams. But because his email accounts are alive and people have gone into them, it's, you just don't want all of a sudden, you've lived your life and now all of a sudden you're out there appearing on different things, doing different things when it's all scams. So just make sure that digital legacy, it's a new part of pre-planning, certainly compared to years ago when we didn't have this, but get it done, get it listed so that family know, because the number of passwords, I'm sure you could think, Natalie, yourself, how many passwords that you have. And yeah, there's so many, and I can't even remember my own. So, just to have them listed for your family, it's another important part of that pre-planning for sure.
It's funny as you talk about passwords. I think it was last week, actually, I went to pay for something and it prompted me to actually put my card in the machine, and then it wanted a password. And I went, what? Said, I don't remember. I absolutely, and it's like you have different bank cards, different passwords, and like, I don't know if this is the right one. And I ended up locking myself out of the card.
Exactly.
Because I put in the wrong password too many times.
Yeah.
So I think it's such a great step that you go through what are your passwords and what are your social media passwords, because it's a big part of our lives now.
Yeah.
And
even paying bills, doing everything online, your estate's continuing, your house still has expenses and somebody has to take care of these. And all of a sudden it's like, it can be a big headache for those for sure. Yeah.
And then I can imagine that, you've passed away. So retrieving that information is, you have to go through hurdles in order to be able to do that.
Well, you probably had to phone in and get your password reset, and you think of all the questions they ask you, and
exactly.
and you're kind of questioning, what was my dog's name, or what was what was my high school that I went to? Yeah.
Oh, so, that's fraud. You shouldn't be asking that.
Exactly.
Great. Well, thank you so much. We have 3 rapid fire questions.
Oh, okay.
To lighten up the mood and maybe show a different angle of what your pre-planning business looks like. So, what's something about the funeral industry that might surprise people?
What would surprise people? I think the number of options.
Okay.
Really. As I mentioned at the beginning, how we thought it was, it's just this or this sort of thing, but just the vast options that are available for anybody to take to, whether it's service, celebration of life, some don't like that term, gathering, with who. And the other part of funerals, believe it or not, sadly, is the heated arguments, discussions, disagreements that come between families who you think would, maybe would be going there. They seem very nice. And all of a sudden you're in a room and the arguments are just, it becomes sad for us to see that at a time like this when, they've just lost their dad. Yeah.
So, and what I was thinking is that there's not really a lot of ghosts that we see or moving body parts. I remember as a child, my uncle died, and I was so terrified. Actually, truth be told, I'm still kind of terrified to be in a funeral home and to go down into the basement. I'm always scared. So, or maybe that's not a surprise and that actually does happen.
No, it's and the other thing is even open caskets nowadays. I just had a lady this morning and she's like, nobody wants an open casket anymore, but she goes, my husband believed in it and he wants, and that's another thing that you don't see very much anymore. Is an open casket. And a lot of us, maybe have gone for years through our life and, and have never had to witness going into a room with an open casket nowadays. Whereas years ago, that was just kind of the norm thing that every casket was open. But yeah, that's another big change. That's for sure.
Got it. If you had to have any kind of funeral service for yourself, no budget limits, what would that look like?
Whew. It would be, for myself, it would be a cremation.
Okay.
And then a service in my church, with lots of good, loud, good going music.
Yes.
Foot stomping music.
Yes.
That it's not, for me, it's not going to be, people better not be sitting there crying and playing certain songs. It's going to be a real, and then followed by just some good, we'll call it a party.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I'm with you 100%.
Yeah.
Good music, colorful, and great food.
Yep. And when you say colorful, we've had everything as far as music and different bands and drums and everything. And we love it because, it's just something different. And you just see a lot of the people, they do come in and they got, at first there's some people might be taken a little back, but then they're like, no, this is okay. Yeah, this is, they can all of a sudden relate saying, yeah, this is what Daryl would want, that good music. And and they go, yeah, that's him. That's what it's all about. So
live a good life and we're celebrating.
Exactly. Yep. Yes. For sure.
So the last one, what's one common myth about funerals that you wish people would stop believing? If any.
A myth about funerals. Gee, you got me on the last one there.
Okay. Well, that's okay.
Yeah. I'm not sure what
well, you think about it, and next time we speak, we'll chat about it.
Oh, we will.
Perfect. So thank you so much for joining us, Daryl. It was very educational and interesting to me, and I'm sure everybody else. And so we appreciate your time and your engagement. So don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. As before, I am Natalie Lewin with Keller Williams, and I help older adults 65 and older to scale down their lives. So if you or someone you know is thinking about scaling down to their next chapter, send me a message, give me a call. I would love to chat. So until next time, take care. Life is beautiful.
Take care, Natalie.
Bye, Daryl.
Bye-bye.